So welcome everyone to another tutorial on the Lion. This is actually going to be parts 3 and 4. So I thought I would do the black and the silver in one tutorial because when I was painting the black I was kind of not too satisfied with it, but as soon as I painted the silver on I was. And that's because you kind of need that silver to make the blue-black look kind of darker, and it just works all together. So I've not finished all the silver because there's quite a lot of it, so I've been just chipping away, doing like a bit here, a bit there, and I've mostly got some bits like there to do. So I'll probably finish the silver in another 1 or 2 sessions. But anyway, I'm definitely at the point where I'm ready to show you the tutorial on it because I've definitely done enough of it. Now, I'll start with a little bit of sad news, but mostly sad to me rather than you. But I actually lost the footage starting off painting the black. So it's disappeared, it's gone forever, which sucks for me. But I managed to get I keep the later part of it, but basically sketching the initial highlights has gone. Now, I have a brand new camera now, so hopefully this doesn't happen again, and hopefully you see some better quality in the footage. So I'm now shooting in 4K resolution and then still exporting it in 1080p, but it should allow me to film with a better quality and also zoom in and not lose any resolution. So you should be able to see a little bit of an improvement in the footage quality. So like I said, I did actually lose the beginning of the black tutorial. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate to you again on this backpack. Now this backpack is really nice because it has some good cylinders, and I'll just show you exactly the same way how I painted the forearms and the thighs and things like that. And I have the later part of the black, so I'll still put that footage in there. But obviously I've had some good practice, so I should be able to show you a nice job. And then I'm also going to do a summary of the silver, where I basically paint the silver of this all in one continuous clip. So anyway, it's a bit of a shame, but like I said, I think it's just a bit of extra work for me, and hopefully you are happy with the tutorial. I'm sure you will be. And I'll just take you through the colours we're going to use for the black now. So it's a really simple recipe, and we start off with the famous dark sea blue, famous from Mr. Ben Comets, and then we're going to use this dark blue grey from AK. You can see quite a nice obvious progression there, and then you can kind of use anything you want after that because you need to have something lighter than this for the focal points, but it doesn't have to be crazy lighter, so you could use a lighter grey that you've got. I'm going to use ivory because I like it, it works really well. Just add a bit of ivory to this blue grey, but you could use something like pale blue from Vallejo, which you've seen in my tutorials loads before. But we're going to switch to the palette now, and I'm going to show you how I make up the colours to do this blue-black. So I thought I'd take you through mixing the colours at the beginning of the video because I quite like doing that and just showing you, and then I don't need the palette cam because I've already shown you how to make all the mixes. So we've got the dark sea blue, which you're going to need neat for the kind of the first stage, and then we have keep reminding myself, the dark blue grey, and you're going to want a mix of that, maybe 2 depending on how you like to paint, but there's a decent difference between these two. So I've got them there, and I just make a little separate mix. That's a kind of a nice halfway between the two, which is cool. From there, you just need to do some mixes of ivory into the dark blue grey. And like I said, it doesn't actually need to be ivory. It can kind of be anything because you don't need to go much brighter than this colour. So I'll probably make a couple mixes of that. So that's a nice step up. Then you'll want one a bit more. And you could use some pre-mixed colours like the pale blue that I always use. You've seen me use that paint in a bunch of tutorials, so hopefully you've got it. That would be a good one. You could mix that with this and then eventually use it on its own. It's kind of similar to this colour I've made here, to be honest. That's definitely as bright as I want to go. I'm actually just darkening that so it's a little lighter than this. But that's probably the colours I'm going to use. Most of it's going to be staying in just this range, and only really the focal points, like the head, am I going to want to use these brighter colours. So yeah, these are probably the tones I'll use, and yeah, let's go. Okay, so one thing I've got to get used to is I'm using autofocus now on the camera, so sometimes you might see it shift and then eventually get back in. But hopefully it means it stays sharper and you get some better footage. So we're going to start with painting the black. There you go, what a great example. It went out of focus there. So we're going to start with dark sea blue on its own, and you want to dilute it so it's translucent, but we're just going to do that pure and neat to start with. Now this is quite cool to paint because you have some lovely cylinders, and basically what we're going to do is paint a main highlight across the top of each cylinder, and then we're going to do a subtle soft, so not as bright, reflection along the bottom. A similar principle to when painting non-metallic metal, but we're doing that with a kind of satin black, so it's not going to have a crazy reflection, but it will have a little bit, and it just looks cool. And we'll do the same thing with the silver on these end parts, but they'll obviously have more contrast. So let's begin with some dark sea blue, reasonably diluted. And we're going to just start by painting the highlight in. That is too diluted, so I'm going to use some thicker paint for the other parts. Now I would suggest making this too broad rather than a skinny highlight, because you can always paint the black in later. It's very easy to do that. So the autofocus is not having a good time, so we might end up switching that off. How's that? So we kind of paint these broad highlights on the top, and then we need to turn this and leave a little bit of black, and then paint in a kind of secondary light. And this is going to be a little bit skinnier, so smaller, because we don't need to go as bright. But what you need to be able to do is when you're looking at it from the main view, you need to be able to see the highlight, the black, and then the second one again. Because if you don't put that secondary one on view, then it's kind of worthless. The whole point of it is to lift the primary light and actually enhance it and make it look better. So I'm just going to paint the whole thing. Doesn't matter if it gets on the trim, because we'll paint over that again later. But it's just easier for me to blast that highlight on. This one needs reworking. And I need to re-glue this because this is wiggling quite nicely. And then basically we're going to do the same on the other side. And I do a side-to-side brush stroke. Getting these in the right place and the right width is actually crucial. If you get this first step right, honestly, you'll probably find the rest easy. You just need to fit in some lighter colours within this band. So if you get this first band, like I said, in the right place, in that right width, then you just need to paint a smaller and smaller part. So getting this right is more important than you think. So yeah, that's the first part, and then we're going to move to that lighter grey now, which is the mix with the dark sea blue and I'm keep looking at the paint to check, dark blue grey. So after you finish the dark sea blue, just move to the mix of the dark sea blue and the lighter grey. And you want to paint this obviously taking up a smaller amount of space, but really just leave a thin band of the dark sea blue, because you don't want this to be a sort of slow, gradual transition. You want it to build up quite quickly into the lighter colours. You could, of course, just use the technique where you paint the brightest grey and just glaze some dark sea blue in. But I still like to paint in this old school layering way, because I kind of build up a bit of texture as I go, which I like, and it just has a look, when you layer it up, that I really like. And it's pretty old school, I guess, just painting in this fashion, but I don't know, I just like it. I always get the nicest result. So yeah, I'm just building that up. You might need a couple layers of each coat, just using it diluted. And when it's dry, check the colours right and adjust the width. Now this colour here, this step, is probably the brightest colour I'll use for the highlight underneath, which actually I've forgotten to do on this side, so I'll stick that in. So yeah, band of black, dark sea blue, and remember we said this highlight on the underside of each cylinder is soft, so that means it's not bright at all. So yeah, just 1 or 2 steps of highlighting as you do the top highlight, and then you leave it alone. So the next step is going to be the pure, keep having to look at it, dark blue grey, and yeah, we'll be just painting that thinner inside of that part. But as you can see, quite simple technique, just have to do it nicely and yeah, the right kind of volume. Okay, so dark blue grey. Trying to paint this really carefully now inside those previous highlights. And I always start too skinny to start with, and then let it dry, and then just check the width's correct, so I can just like make that broader. And you can do all the edge highlighting as well at this point. You can kind of do the edge highlighting whenever's good. And I'm choosing to do little scratchy brush strokes as I build up the paint, which you've seen me do a lot on my marines. That's just what I like the look of. But if you want it smooth, then obviously you just paint a perfect line across and just focus on that width. You can see where I've done the edge highlight already. And I'm just checking the width of this side is correct. And hitting up that edge. And then this part too to match. So the underside, the highlight along the bottom, doesn't get this bright colour now. We're kind of done with that. We might need to adjust it, but yeah, we're pretty much done. Just edge highlight there too. That's not perfect there. Okay, so for the backpack, we've only got one more highlight to go. I'm going to do the highlights on there off cam, and yeah, we'll do the final highlight for the backpack. So this is that first mix we made. So I've just got the tiniest bit of ivory added to the dark blue grey, and yeah, we just paint a nice highlight in here, a little bit brighter. Now this highlight shouldn't be a skinny line. It should be still quite a soft, broad highlight that works with the shape, with the cylinder shape. So don't end up doing a skinny kind of edge highlight when there isn't an edge. That's something I see often. A mistake I used to make all the time when I sort of got into painting these, this style of highlighting, used to finish with this skinny line, and I didn't like the look of it. And that's the reason I didn't like it, because it wasn't natural. So we're trying to kind of follow this shape. And I know it looks rough on the corners at the moment, but what we're going to do is soften that and blend it with some glazing. And that's kind of it, really. So I don't want to go any brighter for this backpack, but we'll flip back to the model itself, and you'll see the only difference is I did push the highlights further around the focal points. But for highlighting on the backpack, I'm obviously going to do it neater off camera and like finish edge highlighting and finish these bits, but that's pretty much the process. Flip to the other side. You can see I've done the same thing. This has just had some glazes on, which I'm going to show you next. So I've taken the dark sea blue and I've diluted it heavily, maybe 6 parts water to paint. So it's very translucent. We've got plenty of videos on glazing, especially the early Blood Angels video. And basically, I just want to blur the edges a little bit. So take my brush, and where the transition needs smoothing, just glaze over. And this will be quite a vibrant blue because it's going over this pale colour, not the black. But it'll be really nice in the transition. And this is where I just take my time. My blend's pretty okay, so I'm just looking to blur the lines a little bit. This will soften up those little scratchy marks too. So you're basically adjusting the volume here as well as smoothing the transition. And now I've done all those parts, this first one's actually dry, so I can do a second pass. So I can basically move around this small part and just glaze until I like the look of it. And it's always pull down and then push away. And already with just a few glazes, it's starting to look better. So I basically continue to do that until I like the transition. If you overglaze, just take your previous colours you've got mixed up and you can re-add in those highlights. We've used dilute paint, so it's it's not a problem to do that. As a side note, I did a little highlight here, like an edge highlight, along where the silver's going to be, and I hate the look of it, so I'm going to erase that completely. I want the edge highlights here because that is an edge, but I don't like that look where, there's basically not an edge, it's just where the rim hits it. I don't think you need that much definition. I think it looks too much. But anyway, that's the kind of the glazing technique that I've used here on both sides. You can see from the top. And I've hit up that edge along there. Oops, didn't mean to do that. I meant to point at it, not put the brush on it. But yeah, that's basically how I did the black. So let's grab the model. So everything is exactly the same here. So you should be able to do the forearm. The only difference is, like I said, because, wait for that to go in focus, hopefully. No, don't want to go in focus, new clip. So I've shown you how to do it on the backpack. And if we look at the tops of the backpack and compare it to the forearm, it's exactly the same technique for the forearm. And we'll watch the footage of me finishing it. You just missed the initial layering, but I managed to rescue kind of the later parts. So here on the thigh and the lower part of the leg, I did the same thing where I went up to that kind of mix. Glazed it a little more, but you can see I haven't gone as bright as I have done here on the forearm and the head. So everything's the same. When we turn here, it's a little bit darker still, so I haven't pushed the highlights hardly at all, just those first couple steps. But what I have done is really push the light on the forearm and the head, and that uses those brighter highlights that I showed you at the start. So we kind of made 3 highlight steps, one with quite a lot of ivory in, and I've saved those just for the focus area. But you can see everything's the same on the model as it was with the backpack. On the arm here we have the main light, then the band of dark, and then that kind of secondary, and it's the same across the leg, and then here and stuff like that. So it's all the same technique really, you just layer up, try and get the volume the right width. The leg's a tricky one because it's such a big cylinder, you've got to make sure it's soft enough. So you can see mine goes all the way to here, and then we have a soft blend because it's kind of a big area. And then on the thigh here it's a bit tighter and a bit smaller. So yeah, just make sure you get those volumes right and you vary it around the model. So on the inside here is dark, this is lighter, this is lighter, and then the focus area is lighter still. And then I'll show you now the rest of the footage I had, and yeah, we'll see what you think. So I was sitting here painting away, and I'm thinking, man, I really want to see what this arm looks like finished. So then I thought, why don't I just finish the whole thing now, film the finished process on the arm, and then we'll come back to stuff. I was kind of working on this area, looking at this, thinking, oh, I really want to finish that. So let's get it done. So I have got the previous grey and I've added a tiny bit of ivory. And you could add anything to this, some white, a lighter grey. It doesn't matter too much because we're not going much brighter. So anything to lighten it just a little. And now we're working in quite a fine area, which is why you kept seeing my head creep in there. Because I was trying to get as close as possible so I can see. But we're going to build this highlight up nice and small. And the same, of course, with the head. So I don't ever want to go to a really skinny fine line like an edge highlight, but they're getting quite small right now. If you ever get confused of the look we're going for, check that artwork and look at that kind of style they're going for. So definitely at the risk now of looking too shiny and more like silver. So I think my final highlight is going to be coming now, and I've just added a little more ivory. You can adjust the contrast to taste because only you know how much contrast you want. So you might prefer less or more. So you might not add any ivory at all and be happy with a more subtle colour. I'm going to add a lot of brightness to these main areas because then it will make the other areas by comparison, you know, it will put them in the shadow basically. So I don't mind having it really bright in these kind of attention grabbing areas, which is basically going to be the arm and the head. So that looks pretty cool. Keep the head out. And a nice little bright highlight down the middle. And you can also pick out the bottom half of the little holes. So just the underside gets a edge highlight, not the tops, because that'll take away from your light source effect. So just hit up the bottoms of them. I'm actually going to add a tiny bit more ivory for the head. There we go. Something like that. Now I'm just going to have a look at that arm. Don't think the arm needs to be any brighter. So I think that's finished. The thigh is going to get those brighter highlights though. So this is the first step for ivory for the thigh, and this is not going to get a second, just the one stop of ivory and dark grey blue, whatever it's called, dark blue grey. and leg 2. So, a little bit of highlight at the very top of that corner. And I'll need to finish the hand as well, so the light matches I'll do that later, but the light on the hand needs to match the light on the forearm, of course. So I'll do that later on. To finish, I'm going to do 2 glazes. One's going to be with dark sea blue, and then one with black. So the dark sea blue will kind of blend all those colours together, and then a glaze of black will obviously just blend it into the pure black kind of finish. So, tiny bit on the brush, nice diluted dark sea blue. And we're going to start where it looks a bit rough on the arm. Got too much paint on my brush there. And we're going to glaze that dark sea blue down. And it doesn't matter where it goes on the bottom, like here, because it will just blend that all together. And we can always add the black later to bring that black back. But we just want to get a little of that dark sea blue in and try and tie these colours together. So while I'm waiting, I might as well glaze this bit a little bit. And I did a pretty good job layering it up, so I don't need many glazes. Just kind of tidying the edge, you know, that transitional point. So I'm going to add a couple more layers of glazes until I like the look of it, and then I'll come back and we'll glaze the black, and then we'll hopefully like the look of it. So once you're happy with the blending of the dark sea blue glazes, if you need to use them, you don't have to. We're going to do some glazes or diluted layers with black. So we just want like a little bit of a column of black going between this main light and the reflection. And it's kind of been lost because of our layers, and also I glazed and pushed it downwards into here. So the glazes have kind of lightened it up a bit. Now, I normally use Vallejo Model Color Black, but it is very matte. And to try and get a deep looking black, you could actually use a more satin black. And that's something like actually GW's Abaddon Black. So I normally don't use it because, well, we all know what Abaddon Black is like. It's not the best. But for a glaze, it's actually pretty fantastic. So once again, we're going to dilute it. If you're not sure about glazing, remember it's all in that Power Sword video where we do the kind of layering and glazing technique, and that's all we're doing here really. So diluted black, not much on the brush, and I'm going to try and paint in a thin line. So I'm kind of pushing down, but making sure I end my stroke where I need to. And it'll be pretty clear when it's wet where I'm going, but hopefully it's nice and blended when it dries. So you can see how we've painted that black back in. And this is the process. While we're waiting for that to dry, let's try and glaze this leg. So I'm going to push the paint there, and then come in that side and pull. Let's have a look at this bit. This is quite a messy bit where I was a little rough and ready maybe. I'll just glaze that way. Probably got a bit too much on my brush right now. And I'm going to go back to the elbow area. It's actually not diluted enough, so I'm just going to thin it a bit more. It's fine for that first brush stroke. to get the black on there, but play with the dilutions to make sure you get the blending right. And making sure I don't eat into that reflection too much and make it too small. But that looks like a very high gloss black now on the arm, but we won't have it as glossy on the rest of the model, is my intention. I'm going to leave the head because I don't want it to be super black there. I think I like it like that. But let's see what that's like when it's dry. And this looks much better with some glazing on the bottom here. So that's kind of the entire process for the black. I'm going to go ahead and paint some more parts and also film some more sections for more examples, probably fixing this part and stuff like that. And then once I've done that, I'll probably do a summary at the end of the process and just talk about, you know, where the lighter situations are on the model. But basically we've dealt with the brightest part, so we know the darker parts, their top highlights are going to be probably something like this colour, and maybe in some places a tiny bit of ivory, but it's not going to go as bright as this. And once that black glaze has gone in, and the blue glaze actually, both stages of glazing make the difference. It looks cool. This is quite shiny, like a shiny black, but like I said, I think if it's only on this arm and the head, then it will work, but I might reduce these parts. So let's see what we come up with. This is actually where I'm going to end my painting session and come back tomorrow and do some more filming and more painting. I thought you might find it interesting that this is where I'm leaving it for today. And I'll come back to it with fresh eyes and continue it. Hopefully I can finish the black in one more session or maybe two. So yeah, this has been an evening for me so far. So this is where I've ended up with the black. I ended up using quite a few glazes of dark sea blue just to really blend in and get the volume right. And that's just given me a nice kind of dark colour. This might seem a little blue for some of you. I was kind of following the reference and it is pretty blue looking, but I'm happy with that. If you want it to be a truer black or more neutral, then I would pick a different colour than dark sea blue. Use something like dark grey from Vallejo. But the reason I'm going for it is it's a contrast to the silver. What I found when I was painting the black, it looked very messy, and that's because during the painting I got a lot of the paint over the trim areas, like here on the forearm, and these lines that run through the shins especially. So I blocked these in black like this here, and it gave me a much better view of how well I'd done the black. You can see how it runs through and it makes a big difference. And then I've done a test for the silver here, and I think it makes the black, or whatever we're going to call this dark blue black, look a lot better by comparison, because this is a lot brighter and it makes it seem darker. So I also tested this out to make sure I was happy with the recipe, and it's a very neutral silver, so it's got very, very little extra colour in it. It is just straight greys almost, but against the blue black I think it works very nicely. And we're going to just keep it simple and try and get the volumes right, and you can see where the shine here matches up with the light on the black, that it looks really, really nice. So yeah, so the black process I've kind of taken you through, it might have changed quite a bit, and that's just due to glazes I've done and readjusting the volume, but everything's kind of stayed the same. You can see the brightest light here, which was that top highlight we did, and then this is reasonably bright but not quite as light as everything around here. And as we turn the figure, you can see where it's a little bit darker. So we have a highlight here, but this is just dark sea blue and a tiny bit of grey, and then this one has a bit more in, so there's just a bit of variety. So this is the brightest area up top, followed by here. Then we have these kind of medium lights, and then we have just some soft highlights in places like the back of the shin here, and then a really soft highlight here. You can see I also experimented with doing the silver in the soft light. So this silver doesn't go as bright as the silver we have here. So I think what I'm going to do is actually show you how I paint the silver on the wrist area, because it's such a nice area to demonstrate on, and possibly this part here too, and then we can roll out the silver areas. So I think that I'll be basically giving you the black and silver tutorials in one, because for me they very much feel the same thing, because it's all part of the armour, right? So you have like the black on the thigh here and the trim that follows it, and I really don't think until you've done both of those elements you'll get a true sense of what it looks like, and if you like the look of the black. For me, I actually wasn't too sure until I blacked out all the areas and actually tested the silver, and then I was like, yeah, this is cool, I really like it, this is going to work for sure. So I think you should probably do the same. Some people might even prefer to paint in sections and you know, do this entire thing down here and then move up rather than do all the black. So I just rather be a bit more candid and truthful of how I work. I haven't even really finished the black yet 100%. Like, I need to do some edge highlighting here on the knuckles and the fingers. But to be honest, I'm a little bored of doing the black, so I just want to do a bit of silver and kind of go through and just do it how I feel. But I'm happy that I've told you how I'm doing the black in terms of the tutorial, but I'd like to just move on and do something else. So I actually think once I've done the silver on the lion, I might have a mini break from him and do some other tutorials, just to make sure I do it at a good standard. I find if I'm starting to get bored of a model, then I should stop, because I won't do as a good job. So yeah, I think I'll get the silver done, and then I've done a lot of the lion in a very short space of time. And I'm really pleased with how it looks so far, so I do not want to rush it. Anyway, when we come back, we'll start with painting the silver here on this wrist. So as I said before, I'm aiming to do a very neutral kind of silver. So I'm just pretty much using straight greys from Vallejo. There's going to be a couple more mixes than with the gold, but it is reasonably straightforward. We're just going to go from a dark grey, a medium grey, and just push it lighter. And we're not going to a pure white at all. So my first highlight colour is going to be Vallejo Dark Grey. And this you could pretty much paint on all of the trim. So here on the wrist, I am going to paint all of that in dark grey. There's only a few places where you might want to leave some of it black, and that's in the extreme kind of shadows. So in the back here, this I've left pure black. I might change it, but yeah, it's only on the real sort of extreme parts that you want to leave some pure black. I'd actually paint most of it in this dark grey, and if you need stronger shadows you can always paint that black, but with the silver, yeah, we don't really need any pure black. Here on the bottom of the elbow, where it gets into the extreme shadow, there I could leave a little bit of black. But on this part, because it's in the sort of that strong light, I definitely want all of that dark grey. So I think what I will do, and it goes across here, I think I'm going to paint everything with the dark grey now, so it's kind of done, and then I might work in smaller sections as we build it up. For this, like I said, I'm going to show you on the wrist, and I think these lines down the shin, because they're really actually quite easy to do and quite fun. You can see I've pretty much painted dark grey on all the areas I want to be silver. Now we're going to go to neutral grey, again from Vallejo, which, as it sounds, is a very boring grey, but it's kind of perfect as a mid-tone. And this is going to follow really the same highlights as your black. So I'm going to paint a large volume of neutral grey on the top here. And then I've left a gap, which is going to have the dark grey, and then I'm going to do a little bit of neutral grey highlight again. And that will follow on the elbow here. Paint this quite large because you need to fit in the highlights that are coming after. Something like that. So it's all about stopping at the right point. You can see I made a mistake there, so I'm going to correct that. That is curse the camera again. So just a little bit dark grey. There we go. And then when it comes to the legs, you're basically going to follow the same thing. So here along these ridges, just carefully paint quite a broad area with that neutral grey. They're quite easy to do non-metallic metal on because they're so skinny. The thinner or smaller the part, the easier it is to do these effects because you need to blend them less. It's a little trickier on the trim like this where it's a bit larger. But again, that's just the same thing. Paint the volume to match the width of your black highlights. And it's already looking pretty cool. You can kind of see where it's going to be heading with that grey on. Just like the gold, it doesn't really look good until you do those final highlights. So what I'll do is probably finish. This part here is interesting. I think I'm going to just edge highlight that. And pick out those rivets. I'm going to let this dry, and like I said, I'm going to show you all the steps on this elbow part, and I think you should be able to follow the rest. Here's another example here on the leg, and you can see it's just the same thing. Paint a wide highlight with neutral grey. That follows the highlight on the thigh. Pick out the trim above. Leave a gap with dark grey. And then do a kind of secondary light where it starts again. And then pick out the edges. And that's pretty much the process that I did on these parts before. So let's move to the next step. In the next step, we're going to be using Blue Grey Pale from Vallejo, this grey. And what you'll find is on larger areas, you might want to do a mix of the previous neutral grey and the Blue Grey Pale. Sort of a 50-50 mix, anything to bridge the gap between the two. But on the smaller details, it's a waste of time. So on the tiny helmet part here, I went straight to the Blue Grey Pale. But on the larger part here, like the forearm and this, then a mix is worth it. So I would make the mix up and have the pure colour on the palette. And as you go around the details, you pick if you need that kind of step in between to do a smoother transition. And it also depends on your style of painting really as well. Now I'm going to turn the model here just so I can paint this volume easier, and I'm going to adjust the camera so it's a bit closer too. So first I'm going to paint my mix. That's going to go all the way to the top. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to use the pure Blue Grey Pale to edge highlight the bottom here. And I'm going to have to get a bit of my head in there so I can do it properly. Nope, too much. Okay, and then this part will get edged highlighted too. and I'll do another little demo on the thigh. So let's start with the mix. Let that dry. And I probably need to do it on these parts too. See me constantly fighting to keep my head out of the shot. Because really I want to paint like this. And that is not a very good shot. Gonna try some new camera positions, I think. It seems obvious, but I have tried many and it's quite tricky. Okay, so that was the mix, and it should have dried by now, so go for the pure colour. And it's still quite a wide highlight at this point. Making sure I don't run out of room. And it should start to feel silvery soon. You can see the difference, the final contrast between the finished bit. It's actually quite good having the finished bit on screen. So yeah, just building up, and there's only going to be a couple more stages. I'm going to go back to here and add the pure pale, whatever it's called. Pale grey, blue grey, pale. Vallejo names are terrible. There's so many combinations of blue and pale and grey, and they just change the order sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to finish by edge highlighting these parts, and just check over this, and then we'll come back and get those next couple stages done. I really do hope that in, well, actually most of the videos, you can see the NMM process doesn't need to be crazy complicated. This is, to be honest, about as simple as silver can get, because we're using very, plain neutral colours. But you can make it look silver, so you can still make it look fantastic, and it's great to learn this way. And then when you feel more confident, then you can try other things. I mean, we obviously did like a more complex situation with the sword and all the colour in that. But I'm really happy with how this model's turning out, the gold and the silver. And the recipes, yeah, are quite straightforward. And it's quite nice for me actually to paint in this way. Just paint straightforward and get things done. Sometimes it's nice not to go overly complicated. I'm just looking for a certain aesthetic, a certain feel to this model. And it doesn't need to be crazy. Anyway, let's move on. Next, we're just going to add a little bit of white to that previous grey. And it should be getting quite tight now in a small space. So, following what we did before, just building up that highlight, paying attention to the volume and just trying to be neat and precise really. That's what's going to make it look good. And you'll learn how much white you need to add at a time just by doing it really. Mix up a few greys on the palette, you know, you can add add white to it and do a few different blobs. You've seen me do it before, and then you just pick the best one for the job. We're not going to use pure white at any point, so yeah, don't do that. But yeah, that's kind of it for this step. So we'll move on to the next one after I've painted a little more. So I went ahead and did the next step, which is just adding a little more white, doing a little bit of a smaller gap. So hopefully you don't need to see me do all of those things. It's just building it up. And because it's getting quite small now, I found it very hard to demonstrate this part on the camera. So I've just done this, and then I'll just show you maybe on here. But like I said, it's pretty much just the same thing now, getting smaller and neater, and just building up that kind of brightness. And we're almost finished. So it should start to look pretty silvery by now. And our last highlight isn't going to be pure white. I want to use something with a bit of colour in, and that always makes it appear brighter if it has colour. If it's a neutral white, it doesn't look like there's any light coming off it. So what you can do is add a little tiny bit of orange to the white, or yellow, or use something that's already bright, such as pastel yellow, pastel peach. I'm actually going to use Highlight Skin, which is a colour from Vallejo/Nocturna, and it's a very, very bright skin colour, but it has a tiniest bit of orange in it. And that's going to be, well, orangey kind of pink anyway. And that's going to be my final highlight for the silver. Hopefully you can see there's the teeniest bit of colour in there. And so I'm going to get that on the palette and apply that now. So, final highlights. You could use ivory for this, by the way. And it's just going to be like this. Very, very small, and that provides the glint. Then it should start to look very nice and silvery. It's pretty awesome doing this bit actually, because then it does start to feel like non-metallic metal, like this. Little shine there is literally just from that final little peachy dot. So, and then I'll basically add this to the very corner of there, a little bit in here, a couple highlights on the head, that sort of thing. I'm reserving that really bright final highlight for these main areas like before. So the silver round here, you can see I've left this at the neutral grey. I'm going to come back and do this later. But the top highlight, might be something like one of the blue, grey and white mixes. Maybe just the first one. It's the same as the gold, the same as the black. We kind of build it up to a certain point and then we stop. And we save those brighter lights for the important parts. And then you've got a lot more logic, and you're also saving the focus for the important parts. If you do these bright lights, everywhere, then the model looks a mess. So you need to save it for places where you can draw attention. But you can see how nice that looks lining up with the black now. And this forearm's quite a nice focal area. Obviously the face should be more of a focus, but this is really, up high and in the center of the model. So this is a wonderful area to paint, and where you can make the model look really impressive. So these lovely cylinder shapes, you've got a cylinder going across horizontally and then one vertically here. This is the stuff you can make the model look cool just by painting the cylinder properly. And then it just looks fabulous. So because this is such teeny work, I'm going to go ahead and just put my little dots on the rivets and do really tight highlights here and stuff like that. Maybe build up that. I wish I did that actually, but I forgot. And then, we'll take a look and see where I'm at after doing a little bit more. But yeah, quite pleased with how this looks in the end. So here we have it, everyone. I have almost finished all the silver and all the black. I've probably got a couple more bits to do, like around the back here on the sword and the bottom here, but it's all going to be the same technique. So hopefully it's clear how to do the black and how to do the silver. And I think these are quite cool recipes. One, because they're simple in terms of having to think about too many colors, and then you can focus on the execution, which is really, really important to me. I'm always trying to make things approachable, to be honest, and non-metallic metal is difficult. So sometimes, like I said before, we use maybe more complex recipes like this sword, which I'm really happy to share with you. And other times we do something simple like the silver and indeed the black on this model. In terms of just the recipe and the process, it is straightforward, but it's difficult to execute because we're trying to get those volumes right. So I'm really happy. I'm really happy with the model myself, to be honest. Obviously I'm doing this as a tutorial for you, but I always do figures that I want to paint, and I always want to do it so I like it. And I'm really happy with it. And it just kind of proved again to me that keeping things simple but trying to do it nicely is enjoyable to paint, and you can make it look really, really great. So hopefully you see the improvement in the video quality footage with the new camera, and I'm excited to carry on doing better and better tutorials, always trying hard to improve these. So obviously this tutorial was a mix with old footage and new footage, but I'm pretty happy with the new stuff, so I'm excited to move forward with the rest of the line tutorials with this better quality. I think next up I'll probably paint the shoulders, and then we'll look at doing the cloth, which will include the big cloak itself. So we're not actually too far away from finishing the line. Once those shoulders and cloths done, there's just a couple details, so I'm thinking it's going to be 3 more tutorials, probably shoulder pads, cloth, and then final detail. And the base, we'll do the base as well, but maybe I'll do that with the final detail so it's a decent video. As always, let me know your feedback, and let me know what you think.